The sun was bleeding out over the canyon when the stranger came riding from the north. Dust clung to his braids and the last of the daylight caught the obsidian glint of his hair. He was Apache, that much was clear, but his eyes held something darker than the land itself. He rode without a saddle, his Mustang lean and scarred from miles of silence. He reached the riverbank just as dusk folded into night. Coyotes called in the distance, and a chill moved through the willows like a ghost whispering old stories. The stranger dismounted, filled his hands with water, and drank. He did not expect company. Not this deep in the Badlands. Not near Smoke Ridge, where white men once buried their greed and Apaches buried their dead. But then he heard her voice. "I am taking bath. Will you join me?" He turned sharply. A woman was waist-deep in the water, her dark hair tangled with moonlight. Her voice was calm, not teasing, not afraid, just steady, like someone who had forgotten what fear was. She was older than most frontier women he'd seen, maybe 30, but her eyes burned with the same wild light as the desert itself. He didn't answer. His fingers lingered near the knife on his belt, not for violence, but habit. The woman smiled faintly. "Don't worry, stranger. I ain't gonna rob you. Not unless you've got something worth robbin'." He said nothing. "Name's Mara," she added after a moment, her tone softening. "You look like you've ridden through hell and back. The river's warm from the springs. You can wash off the road if you want." The Apache's voice came low, steady. "Water don't wash off what I carry." Something flickered in her eyes. "Then maybe it'll help you remember what's still worth carrying." He stared at her for a long moment, the moon rising behind her shoulders like a halo of silver. The water rippled around her, reflecting the stars, and for an instant, she looked like a spirit, one of those river maidens his grandmother used to warn about. Spirits that lured lonely men with kindness, not beauty. He stepped closer to the river, but stopped short of the edge. "This land is Apache," he said quietly. "White folks don't wander here unless they're lost or running." Her smile faded. "I'm both." The wind sighed through the mesquite trees. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried again, longer this time, like a warning. He nodded once. "Then you should keep moving before the dark finds you." But Mara didn't move. She dipped her hands into the river, letting water drip between her fingers. "The dark already found me, stranger. It just doesn't scare me anymore." Something about the way she said it made him uneasy. He'd met outlaws, runaways, and women with ghosts on their heels, but none who spoke like her. There was a calmness in her, something dangerous. He started to turn away when she said, "You from the tribe beyond the ridge?" He paused. "I was? They are gone now." The words hung heavy between them. The wind carried ashes from an unseen fire. Mara's expression softened. "Then maybe you and I are the same. I lost my people too." He looked back at her, really looked this time. Beneath the dirt and weariness, there was truth in her eyes, raw and unguarded. Not pity, not curiosity, just recognition. "What are you doing out here alone?" he asked. Finally, her answer came slow. "Waiting for someone I shouldn't have trusted. He took everything I had. Except my life. Guess he thought that wasn't worth much." The Apache's jaw tightened. He didn't ask more. He knew betrayal when he saw Mara rose from the water, the moonlight sliding down her bare shoulders like silver rain. She wrapped herself in a faded blanket lying on the rocks. "If you're heading toward Smoke Ridge," she said, "don't. The ridge ain't safe for anyone anymore, not since the fire." He looked at her, puzzled. "What fire?" Her eyes shifted toward the horizon, where faint smoke still coiled like a dying serpent. "The kind that doesn't go out easy." And with that, she walked past him, dripping and quiet, leaving behind only the scent of river water and mystery. He watched her vanish into the night, the river whispering secrets in a tongue older than man. For the first time in years, the Apache felt something stir inside him, not trust, not yet, but the faint echo of purpose. Mara's footsteps faded into the whisper of crickets, leaving the Apache warrior alone with the night and his unease. The river shimmered behind him like a blade's edge reflecting stars. But he could still smell the smoke she spoke of, faint yet steady, curling from the horizon like a memory that refused to die. He didn't trust her. He'd learned long ago that trust got men buried faster than bullets. But something in Mara's voice had caught him, a kind of truth he couldn't turn from. She'd said she was running. He'd been running too, only his ghosts were older. The next morning, as dawn brushed the land in gold, he followed the smoke. His Mustang moved quiet as breath through the sagebrush. Ravens wheeled above, black wings slicing the sky. By midday, he found it, or what was left of it, Smoke Ridge. Once, this place had been sacred ground. His people had buried their ancestors here. Before the soldiers came and built a settlement above it, miners, ranchers, men with greed for gold. Now it was all ashes and silence. Charred timbers jutted from the earth like broken ribs. Wagons burned to their wheels. And near the edge of the ridge, a small cabin had been turned to cinder, except for one wall that somehow still stood, half burned and streaked with handprints. He dismounted slowly, the silence heavy as a graveyard. Then he saw something that made him freeze. Footprints. Bare feet, small, fresh. Mara's. She'd been here. He followed the tracks to a patch of dirt where the fire hadn't touched. There, amid the ash, lay something glinting. A silver locket, half melted by flame. He picked it up carefully, rubbing away the soot until he could see the faint engraving on the back. To always. Always, he muttered under his breath. A promise or a lie, sometimes they were the same thing. Behind him, the sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Didn't think you'd follow me. Mara's voice came, calm but tired. He turned. She stood a few paces away, wearing a dusty coat now, her hair still damp from the night before. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet kind of sorrow. You said the ridge wasn't safe, he said. You came anyway. She nodded. Because what I lost was here. He held up the locket. This yours? She took it from his hand and closed her eyes for a moment. Used to be. Belonged to my husband. There was silence between them, long enough for the wind to whisper through the ruins. What happened? He asked. Her voice trembled, barely. He came here for gold. Promised me a house, a future, maybe even peace. But men don't come to Smoke Ridge for peace. They come for what burns. Her gaze drifted to the ashes of the cabin. He found gold under the old burial stones. Your people's land. When I tried to stop him, he said I was just another thing he owned. The fire came that night, maybe from the lamp, maybe from God. I don't know. I just remember the screams and the smoke. The Apache studied her face, trying to read whether she spoke truth or guilt. You were the only one who lived? Seems like it. He knelt beside the blackened earth, pressing his palm against it. The ground still felt warm, though the fire had long died. Your man disturbed what shouldn't have been touched, he murmured. This land remembers, Mara's voice broke softly. I know. I've been trying to forget, but the ridge won't let me. He rose to his feet, his expression unreadable. Then you shouldn't stay. She looked up at him, eyes hard now. And go where, Apache? The towns think I started the fire. The soldiers say I'm cursed. You think I can just walk away? He said nothing. After a long pause, she stepped closer, the wind stirring her hair. What's your name? He hesitated. It had been years since anyone asked. Talon, he said finally. Son of Nate, of the old San Carlos band. Mara nodded, the name rolling like a prayer. Then, Talon, maybe you didn't come here by accident. He frowned. You think this was fate? I think this ridge called us both, you to remember and me to atone. Before he could answer, a crack echoed from the canyon, a rifle shot. A bullet tore through the dirt between them. Mara dropped to her knees. Talon spun toward the ridge, eyes sharp. Another shot rang out, splintering the burnt beam beside him. They found me, she whispered. The men who think I burned the camp. Talon's hand went to his knife as he stepped in front of her. Scanning the ridges, he could see them now, 3 riders. Rifles raised, coming fast through the smoke. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of gunpowder and revenge, and just like that, the ghosts of Smoke Ridge weren't the only ones awake. Gunfire split the calm of the ridge like thunder tearing the sky. Talon pushed Mara behind the wrecked beam of the burned cabin, his instincts flaring alive. The air was thick with smoke and memory, and now, danger. 3 riders came fast from the canyon trail. Their silhouettes glowed against the burning horizon, faces masked by bandanas, rifles glinting under the fading sun. Mara clutched Talon's arm, her breath uneven. They're bounty men, she whispered. They think I set the fire that killed my husband and his crew. Talon's eyes narrowed. You didn't? She met his gaze, trembling but firm. No, but I didn't save them either. A bullet struck the ground near his feet. Talon drew his knife and crouched low, eyes darting to the ridge. Stay behind me. Mara's voice cracked with fear and something more, guilt. You'll be killed for me. He didn't answer. He moved like a shadow, darting from one charred wagon to another, silent as smoke. When one rider came too close, Talon hurled his knife. It spun through the air and struck the man's shoulder. The rider screamed, tumbling off his horse. The other 2 fired blindly, their shots ricocheting off stone. Mara ducked lower, clutching the dirt. Talon moved swiftly, retrieving a rifle from the fallen man. He aimed once, calm as still water, and fired. Another rider spun sideways, his hat flying as his horse bolted. The last man turned tail, galloping hard toward the canyon mouth. Silence returned, broken only by the dying echo of hooves. Mara lifted her head slowly, eyes wide. You saved me. Talon reloaded the rifle without looking at her. They'll come back. Not alone next time. She rose shakily. Then we leave. He glanced toward the ridge, where the fire's embers glowed like angry eyes. This land doesn't let go easy. Mara followed his stare, her voice soft. Neither does guilt. They saddled his Mustang and rode toward the canyon. The land stretched endless, scorched plains, dry wind, the smell of ash and sage. The world felt both empty and full of ghosts. As night fell, they made camp by a cluster of red rocks. Talon built a small fire, though he seemed uneasy even doing that. Mara sat opposite him, her face lit by the flames. You're quiet, she said. He poked the fire with a stick. Quiet is how my people survived. She studied him. You lost them in the wars? He nodded. The soldiers called it relocation. We called it death. His voice was low, even, but each word carried weight. They took our lands, our families, our names. I walked away from the blood, but blood walks with me. She looked into the flames. I know that feeling. Talon's gaze lifted. What really happened, Mara? She hesitated, then sighed. My husband Elias wasn't just mining. He found gold in the Apache graves. I begged him to stop. He laughed. That night, he brought men with whiskey and greed. There was fighting. Someone dropped a lantern. I tried to drag him out, but the fire, her voice broke. I ran, and the town blamed me. Said a jealous wife burned her man for gold. Talon's expression hardened. Gold always burns everything it touches. She met his eyes. Then why did you come here? You could have ridden anywhere. He stared into the dark. Something called me back. Smoke Ridge was where my father died. Soldiers buried him beneath white men's cabins. I came to find his spirit. For a long time, neither spoke. The desert wind whispered through the rocks, carrying cinders and secrets. Then, faintly, Mora said, "Maybe your father's spirit brought you to me." Talon looked at her, really looked, for the first time without suspicion. The light of the fire caught the edges of her face, the exhaustion, the defiance, the grief. "Maybe," he said finally. But before peace could settle, the Mustang neighed sharply. Talon rose, hand going to his rifle. From the shadows beyond the firelight came the crunch of footsteps, careful, deliberate. Mara froze. "They found us again." Talon's eyes narrowed. "No," he said. "These steps are slower, heavier. Not bounty men." From the dark emerged an old Apache elder, wrapped in furs and feathers, his face painted with ashes. His eyes glowed in the firelight like burning coals. He looked at Talon and spoke in their tongue, voice raspy but strong. "You brought her here, son of Naish. The one the land remembers." Mara's face went pale. "What's he saying?" Talon didn't answer. He only stared at the elder, his father's friend, a man he'd buried years ago. The dead were walking at Smoke Ridge. The fire flickered low, painting ghostly shapes on the canyon walls. The old Apache elder stepped closer, his shadow long and trembling in the heat. His eyes, milky with age yet burning with something eternal, locked on Talon's. "Talon, son of Naish," he rasped, his voice like wind over bone. "You walk where the spirits have not rested." Talon rose slowly, rifle still in hand, unsure whether the man before him was flesh or memory. "You should be dead," he said quietly. The elder smiled faintly. "I am. But death does not silence the earth when it still has words to speak." Mara stood frozen beside the fire, her breath quick. "Talon, what is he saying?" Talon hesitated before translating. "He says the land remembers us, and it remembers you." Mara blinked, her voice shaking. "Me?" The elder pointed a trembling hand toward her. "The white woman who carried fire in her heart. She stands on sacred ground. The ridge burns because of her." Talon's chest tightened. "She didn't light that fire," he said sharply. The old man turned his gaze back to him. "You think I speak of wood and flame, boy? I speak of the fire that calls souls from the dirt. She was chosen before she knew the meaning of loss." Mara's face went pale. "What's he saying now?" Talon looked at her, uneasy. "He says you were meant to come here. That this land was waiting for you." Mara backed away a step. "That's crazy." The elder ignored her words. He reached into a pouch hanging from his neck and pulled out a small, charred stone, smooth and dark as river glass. "This was taken from your husband's hands," he said in Apache, his tone mournful. "He disturbed the grave of the firekeeper, the guardian buried beneath Smoke Ridge. Now the spirit roams, restless until the woman returns the debt." Talon frowned deeply. "What debt?" The elder turned, staring toward the dark outline of the ridge. "Blood and peace. One must return to silence the other." Then, like smoke and wind, the old man stepped back into the shadows and was gone. The silence that followed felt too heavy to breathe. Even the fire seemed to shrink from it. Mara clutched her coat tight. "Talon, what did he mean?" Talon sat slowly, his eyes distant. "The firekeeper is an old story. My people believed he guarded the border between the living and the forgotten. When the white men dug gold from our graves, they woke him. They say his anger burns through time." Mara swallowed hard. "And he thinks I woke it?" Talon didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on the glowing ridge, where faint embers still pulsed in the night. Finally, he said, "Maybe not you alone, but you were part of it." Her voice trembled. "Then what do I do?" He looked at her, steady but not unkind. "We go back. To the graves. To where it started." Mara's eyes widened. "Back to Smoke Ridge? Are you insane?" "Those bounty men, they'll find you no matter where you run," he interrupted. "But the firekeeper will find you first." The way he said it made her shiver. She nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right. By dawn they rode again. The desert stretched endless ahead, all red dust, dry wind, and the faint smell of smoke that never seemed to fade. Hours passed before Mara spoke again. "Why are you helping me, Talon?" "You don't even know me." He rode in silence for a moment. "Because I've seen what happens when spirits don't rest. My father's soul still lingers on that ridge. Maybe if I help you, he'll finally find peace too." They reached the ridge by afternoon. The place looked worse in daylight. Blackened earth, broken stones, and bones scattered among the ashes. Mara dismounted slowly. "This is where he died," she whispered. Talon knelt by the soil, brushing his hand over the charred ground. "No," he said quietly. "This is where something else died, something older." A sudden wind gusted through the canyon, scattering ash like gray snow. The smell of smoke thickened, though there was no fire. Then, faintly, from beneath the ground came a sound, a low hum, like a heartbeat in the earth. Mara froze. "What is that?" Talon rose, his eyes wide with understanding and fear. "The firekeeper," he whispered. "He's awake." The soil trembled. The air shimmered with heat, though the sun had faded behind clouds. From the ashes near the grave pits, faint tongues of flame began to rise, but they burned cold, blue, unnatural. Mara stepped back, panic gripping her. "Talon," he grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "Don't run," he said. "If you run, he'll follow." A shape began to form in the smoke, tall, shadowed, glowing faintly red beneath translucent skin. It wasn't a man. It wasn't alive. It was the spirit of Smoke Ridge, risen again. The wind howled across Smoke Ridge as blue fire licked the air, twisting into shapes that were almost human. Mara clung to Talon's arm, her breath ragged, eyes wide as the smoke began to move with intent as if it were alive. The spirit rose higher, its form half shadow, half flame. Within the fire, faint faces appeared, men screaming, men burning. Then one face lingered longer than the rest. Mara gasped. "Elias?" Talon turned sharply. "Your husband?" She nodded, trembling. "That's him." That's before she could finish. The spirit's voice rolled through the canyon like thunder, deep and broken, neither male nor female. "The thief returns with the fire still in her heart." Mara stepped back, shaking. "I didn't mean to. I never." The ground shuddered. The flames flared brighter. Talon stepped forward, standing between Mara and the spirit, his voice steady. "She carries guilt, but not the greed that burned your resting place. The fire was not her doing." The spirit's burning eyes turned to him. "And you? Son of Nate, you carry a blade stained with your own people's blood. You speak of innocence?" Talon stiffened. The air seemed to freeze around him. Mara looked up at him, startled. "What is it talking about?" Talon's voice came low. "It knows what I've done." The spirit's voice thundered again. "He fought beside the soldiers who burned these graves. He led them to Smoke Ridge for food and peace. They gave him betrayal and fire." Mara's face filled with disbelief. You helped them?" Talon's jaw clenched, eyes burning with shame. "I was young. I thought surrender would save lives. They promised peace. They brought death. The spirit's flames flickered, and suddenly the air was filled with images, ghostly echoes of battle. Apache warriors falling beneath bullets. Women screaming. The ridge in flames. Mara covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Oh God! Talon didn't move. He faced the vision like a man already condemned. If this is my punishment, he said quietly, then take me. Leave her. The spirit's glow pulsed violently. You both carry the fire. You both will answer. The ground split beneath them, and before Mara could scream, the earth swallowed them whole. They fell, through smoke, through memories, until they landed on hard ground lit by a dim red glow. When Mara opened her eyes, she was no longer on Smoke Ridge. They stood in a cavern of stone and ash, walls painted with ancient handprints. In the center, a circle of embers glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Talon steadied her. We're beneath the ridge, he said softly. In the firekeeper's chamber. A whisper echoed around them. To cleanse the fire, you must return what was taken. Mara knelt, trembling. Return what? I don't have anything, Talon frowned, glancing at the locket around her neck. The silver one from the ashes. He reached for it gently. The locket. It's not gold, but it carries what your husband stole, his memory, his guilt. Maybe this is what binds the spirit. Mara clutched it tightly. If I give it up, it's all I have left of him. Talon's voice softened. Then give it up for him. Let him rest. Her eyes met his, the strength in his stare, the sorrow behind it, and slowly she unfastened the locket. She placed it into the circle of embers. The flames rose instantly, swirling around them in a spiral of light. The cavern shook. The spirit's voice roared, not in anger this time, but grief. The fire is fed, but the bond remains. One must stay to guard what has been cleansed. Mara's heart stopped. What does that mean? Talon understood. He looked at her, the weight of his past heavy in his eyes. It means one of us doesn't leave this place. She shook her head fiercely. No, I won't. He touched her cheek gently. You've already carried too much guilt. Let me carry mine. The spirit's fire began to fade, dimming to red embers again. Talon, please. He gave her a faint, tired smile. Maybe now Smoke Ridge can rest. The ground trembled once more, and before she could speak, a wave of light engulfed them. When Mara opened her eyes, she was lying on the ridge again under a pale dawn. The fire was gone. The air was still. But Talon was nowhere to be seen. Only his knife lay half buried in the dirt beside her, and the wind carried a whisper that sounded like his voice. The land remembers. Rain began to fall over Smoke Ridge like tears from the heavens. The sky was bruised purple, thunder muttering across the canyon as lightning traced the edges of the cliffs. The sacred fire below had been extinguished, leaving only smoke and silence in its wake. Elias, the Apache warrior, stood bare-chested in the rain, his long black hair plastered against his shoulders, tribal jewelry glinting faintly under each flash of light. His body bore the marks of battle, shallow cuts, dust, and the memory of every soul he had failed to save. But now, the woman beside him was alive, barely. Her name was Lydia, and though she trembled under the storm, her eyes were open, clear, frightened, and full of unspoken questions. She had seen things no outsider was meant to witness. The ritual fire, the spirit of the elder, the truth of Elias's curse. He crouched beside her, wrapping his buffalo hide blanket around her soaked frame. You shouldn't have stayed, he murmured, voice deep and low. You told me not to run, she whispered, trembling. You said the mountain would take me if I did. Elias looked toward the cliffs, dark shapes looming like the ribs of the earth. It takes all who are not meant to see the truth. She shivered harder, watching him in the rain. His face was unreadable, carved in pain and quiet fury. The storm roared louder, and for a moment she saw the fire reflected in his eyes, not the fire from the cavern, but something burning within him still. What did that spirit mean? She asked, almost shouting over the wind. He said your name like you were dead. Elias didn't answer at first. He stared into the distance where the lightning split the sky, revealing the shadow of a lone rider, one of the men who had destroyed the camp days ago. He was my father, Elias finally said. Long before your people came to these lands. He buried me in fire so that I could rise again. I was meant to protect what's sacred, but I failed. Now the curse keeps me between both worlds. Lydia blinked rain from her lashes. You're saying you can't die? He turned to her, the rain dripping from his chin. I can die, but not until I keep my promise. She touched the locket at her throat, the same one that had belonged to her mother. Inside it was a faded portrait of a woman and a man in uniform, both victims of the same raid that destroyed the ridge years ago. Your promise, she said softly, is it to them? Elias looked at the locket, then at her. No, it's to you. Lightning cracked again, closed this time, and the ground trembled. The mountain moaned, a low rumble that made the horses below cry out. Elias stood, scanning the horizon, then reached for his rifle. They're coming. Who? The men from the fire. The ones who think you know where the gold is. Her breath caught. Gold? There's no. He cut her off sharply. To them there is. They burned the ridge for it. They killed for it. And they'll come again until they take you too. She stood weakly, clutching the blanket tighter. Then we run. Elias shook his head. No, we fight. He looked toward the narrow canyon path, rain pouring down like a curtain between life and death. His bare chest rose with slow, determined breaths. The storm had awakened something inside him, not rage, but purpose. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from Lydia's cheek. When the thunder stops, he said, I'll lead them into the river gorge. You ride east toward the hills. Don't look back. Her lips trembled. You'll die. Maybe, he said, but not without keeping my promise. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the voices of spirits unseen. Then, slowly, Lydia leaned forward and touched her forehead to his chest, the symbol of gratitude and trust among his people. I'll wait for you, she whispered. He smiled faintly, a shadowed, heartbreaking smile. Then I'll have a reason to return. The thunder rolled once more, and in its wake, Elias walked into the darkness, the storm swallowing his silhouette as lightning lit the cliffs. Lydia watched until he vanished completely, the echo of his words and the rhythm of the rain the only things left behind. Somewhere in that storm, a promise began to breathe again. The rain had not stopped by dawn. It came in soft sheets now, whispering against the rocks of Smoke Ridge, washing away the soot, the blood, and the ghosts that had haunted this land for far too long. Lydia sat beneath a twisted cedar, her dress torn, her eyes red from crying. Her horse grazed nearby, restless but alive. She clutched the locket to her chest, its silver surface cold as the wind. Every rumble in the distance made her flinch, every crack of thunder made her pray. Please, let him still be breathing. Somewhere beyond the ridge, gunfire had echoed through the night. She'd heard it, 3 sharp shots, then silence. The kind of silence that buried hope. She rose slowly, her knees weak but her heart refusing to rest. The path ahead was slick with mud, the earth trembling faintly beneath each step. Smoke drifted in lazy curls from the canyon below, and Lydia followed it, each breath filled with fear, each heartbeat whispering his name. Elias! The ridge opened to a clearing by the river, where the storm had torn down trees and flooded the lowlands. And there, half submerged in the mud, lay a single turquoise bead, the kind from his necklace. She fell to her knees, picking it up with trembling fingers. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Don't let this be all that's left of you." Then she heard it, the faint snort of a horse. Her head snapped up. Through the mist, a figure emerged, walking slowly beside his Mustang. The man was bare-chested, soaked in rain, mud streaked across his skin. His long black hair clung to his back, and his turquoise jewelry caught the dull light like morning stars. "Elias," Lydia ran to him, slipping on the wet stones, but he caught her before she fell. For a moment, neither spoke. His arms wrapped around her, strong and trembling, and she pressed her face against his chest, feeling the wild rhythm of his heart. "I thought—" she began. "I know," he said quietly. His voice was tired, deep as thunder after the storm. "They're gone now. The ones who came for you. The mountain took them." She looked up at him. His eyes were heavy, shadowed by pain. "You're hurt." He shook his head faintly. "Not enough to stop breathing." They stood there, surrounded by the smell of wet earth and the soft hiss of the rain. The world had changed overnight. Smoke Ridge, the place that had stolen her family, that had cursed his spirit, was finally quiet. "Elias," she said softly, "what happens now? Will you stay?" He looked toward the horizon, where the morning sun fought through the mist. "I made a promise to you," he said, "to protect you, to see this end, and it's over now." "Yes," he said. "For you?" Her throat tightened. "What do you mean, for me?" He took her hand, pressing the turquoise bead into her palm. "My time here is done, Lydia. When the fire went out, the curse went with it. The spirits are free." "So am I." She shook her head, eyes filling with tears. "No, you said you'd return." "I have," he said gently. "Just not to stay." The air around them grew strangely still. The rain softened to a whisper, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Elias reached up, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand, a touch that burned like warmth fading too fast. "You taught me something," he said, his voice trembling, "that even after death, a man can still find something worth protecting, worth loving." She tried to speak, but no words came. He leaned closer, resting his forehead against hers, the thunder far away now, like a memory dissolving into silence. When she finally looked up again, the rain had stopped. The clearing was empty. His horse stood alone, untethered. The turquoise necklace lay in the mud where he'd been standing. Lydia sank to her knees, clutching it against her heart, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from the trees. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. "You kept your promise." And as the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, a warm wind swept through the ridge, carrying with it the faintest echo of a voice, deep and steady, whispering from beyond the canyon, "I am still watching." "Lydia!" She closed her eyes, smiling through her tears. The mountain was silent now, but the spirit that once haunted it had finally found peace. And in her heart, so had she. Smoke Ridge was no longer cursed. It was hallowed.